reached Psalm 129. We'll read that psalm and then we'll talk about that psalm. But before we do either of those things, we'll pause and we'll have a word of prayer. So if you'd pray with me. Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this world that you have made. We thank you for this time that we have to study from your word. And we ask, Father, your blessing on us now as we do so, that we may better understand your word and better understand our role doing your will. And Father, we ask that you would help us to have the courage and the strength to do that, to follow your will whenever we find it difficult or daunting, that we would be given the courage and strength to carry it through. We are grateful, Father, for all that you have done, and we ask that you would be with those who are unable to be here and be with us, whether for travel or illness or whatever it may be, but that you would watch over them and bring them back again to the congregation. We are grateful for all these things, and most of all for your Son, Jesus, in whose name we pray. All right. Psalm 129, a song of ascents. 2/3 of the way through the songs of ascents. 5 more to go. Many a time have they afflicted me from my youth up. Let Israel now say, many a time have they afflicted me from my youth up, yet they have not prevailed against me. The plowers plowed upon my back, they made long their furrows. Yahweh is righteous, he has cut asunder the cords of the wicked. Let them be put to shame and turned backward, all those who hate Zion. Let them be as the grass upon the housetops, which withers before it grows up, with which the reaper does not fill his hand, nor he who binds sheaves his bosom. Neither do those who go by say, the blessing of Yahweh be upon you, we bless you in the name of Yahweh. What is this psalm about? Yes, sir. Okay, yeah, there's imprecation, right? This is the imprecatory style of psalm where it is a prayer for things to be done to the enemies of Zion, okay? There's, I think, a second element here as well. There are two combined. A lament. Why would you say a lament? Okay. Bad things have been happening. Okay. Fair enough. That's not what I had in mind. Israel's oppression. See, and this is very interesting to me, because this is not the direction that my mind tended when I thought about this. I thought about it as thanksgiving and imprecation. That the first half would be thanksgiving. And the reason I would distinguish this from lament, I know that everybody's deeply excited to hear me talk about words and their definitions. My wife is already rolling her eyes, I'm sure. But the reason that I would do this is because there is not a petition in the first 4 verses. There is not actually any asking for something. It is a description of what God has already done. Now, this may be that somebody's got a translation that does not cast that into the past tense. Verb tenses in Hebrew apparently are quite difficult. Psalm 129, Keith, sorry about that. I can make that font bigger. That's a good note for me. Make font bigger. The reason is that in those first 4 verses, it does this as, this is what's happened in the past, but God has saved us. That we are thankful that though there have been problems, they have not overcome us. And then there's a period of transition, which we'll note later as well when we get into it. It's halfway through where he goes into, and now, and asks for God to smite the enemies of Israel. So it kind of covers those both things. The only reason, again, I wouldn't say it's a lament, even though it is talking about negative things, bad things, is because it isn't about something that's happening now that they need protection from. It's about bad things that have happened that they have already been rescued from. If I can end 2 sentences in a row on a preposition. There are some commentators that will argue, and I ran across, saying this must have been written for a specific point in time, but that's not evident from the text itself. There's nothing about a specific enemy. It doesn't actually say anything about a specific person or a nation or even really an event Like, oh, we're being attacked, or oh, people are slandering me, the way some are, which we get into more of the lament. But you're not the only one who thought it partook more of the lament side of things, or that idea, because, again, some people argue that it must have originally been about that and transitioned, essentially, or changed over time to be just considered a more general type of psalm. So, why repeat the first line directly? Okay, emphasis. This is usually the reason for repetition. But what is being emphasized then? What is being emphasized in the first verse and then in the second verse of Psalm 129?
Persecution.
Okay, persecution, absolutely. It is an emphasis on the kind or the repetition of the persecution, right? Many times. But there's something else being emphasized here as well, I think, that goes along with that. Yes, and even without the end of verse 2, right? With the end of verse 2 makes it explicit. They have not prevailed. What is necessary for being persecuted or attacked many times? It's implied in the fact that it's happened many times. Sure, yeah, as you're over the target, but that they've survived. You can't attack me twice if I don't survive the first one. You can't attack me many times if I don't keep enduring, keep surviving, keep being rescued. Yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah, and it's going to be emphasizing their faith in God and their reliance upon the Lord. Yeah. But the idea then that we're repeating this and emphasizing this, many times people have persecuted us, is not just about the fact that many times have they been persecuted. That's a part of it. But the implied other part of it is, and many times God has preserved us. Many times God has saved us, because if that were not the case, they would not be there to be persecuted again. In a sense, I think of this, and this is maybe, if you're a big fan of baseball, like I am, you have to actually be a pretty good pitcher to lose 20 games in a season. Right? You think, oh man, 20 games, you lose 20 games, that's a lot. Sure, it is. But if you weren't pretty good, they wouldn't keep sending you out there to lose some more. Right? If you weren't doing at least a pretty good job and giving your team a chance, you wouldn't keep getting that opportunity. And this is a similar sort of idea. Israel continues to be persecuted, but Israel is still there to continue to be persecuted. They are under attack, but they do not get destroyed. And I think this ends up being a pretty good metaphor for the church, right? That Jesus in the Gospels and the Sermon on the Mount talks about the fact that we will be persecuted. People will attack us, and we will know that we are being effective in the world and we are being true and faithful witnesses, because the evil people of the world will hate that. And they will attack us, but we will not be overcome. The church will not be overcome. It will not be destroyed. All right. Emphasis on the persecution and endurance. But what about verse 3? The plowers plowed upon my back. They lengthened their furrows. A furrow, of course, just in case, is the line that has been plowed, where the earth has been turned up and there is now a groove in which the planting will be done. Yeah.
Is that a reference to hard labor?
It could be a reference to hard labor, yeah, I think so. But why upon their back? Yeah, I think that gets into part of it, the idea of being punished or whipped or persecuted. The idea of being struck with a whip leaves a line. It cuts a line in the skin. And then there is a scar, a raised scar afterwards, oftentimes, that is very much like the raised mound of earth that gets pushed up by the plow. The whole thing is a large metaphor for people being attacked, people being hurt, right? That this is something that is being done both deliberately and very intentionally. No one plows a field by accident, right? You don't plow long, straight lines, nice long furrows, and very straight lines by mistake. I have one person shaking their head like, I could come up with a situation, but okay, generally speaking, that's not what happens. It's not done by accident. You do this deliberately. This is a deliberate persecution. This is someone who is deliberately trying to injure, to harm, to scar, to damage. This is an intentional attack upon the people of Israel. And this is one of the things that he is saying, essentially, that many times Israel has suffered this kind of attack. This is the kind of thing that is done. It takes a while to plow a field, too, if you're doing it by, well, I say by hand, but with a team of oxen and an old manual plow, just a piece of wood with maybe a metal plow point. Again, it's not something, in modern technology, you get the big tractor and you can do a bunch at once, but once upon a time, yoke of oxen and a plow, one line at a time. To speak of plowing is about not just the damage, but it is also the deliberation and the length of time that is being taken. Right? This is something that is definitely planned and done deliberately. It's not an accident. It's not a mistake. It's an intentional effort. But this is the past tense. We've been doing this in the past tense. And in 4, we have the kind of reversal or the culmination of the first half of this psalm. In the present tense, or the infinitive, is what God is. Yahweh is righteous. Why put that in that present tense when the rest is in the past? Yes, sir.
He's forever righteous.
Yeah, it's always the case. God continues to be this way. The persecution happens and the persecution goes, but God remains. God endures. God is eternal. His righteousness is without end. Yeah. And it is this deliberate contrast between who God is and what God does and the things that those who oppose him and God's people are capable of. They will attack, but they will be thwarted. So in the past tense, he has cut the cords of the wicked. The connection, where did I put that? There it is. Drawing a connection between who God is and what God does, right? The infinitive sense. He is protecting, and then he is going to, has in the past, will in the future, implied, because persecution will come again, cut the cords. What does that mean?
Makes me think of Greek mythology with tapestry and cutting the threads.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that. The idea of,
Cutting a life short.
okay. I wouldn't have thought it, interesting. Okay, Greek mythology. I think of the Norns, right, with the Norse mythology does the same thing, the idea of the thread of one's life being cut, right? The implication of death. I don't know if that would have had the same resonance within the Hebrew context, but that's interesting. Yeah, I think it certainly can apply. Yeah.
And I think it implies removing control.
Removing control. That's one of the things that I thought about, when I was going over this, is the idea that being bound, right? That you are held or captive, right? You're tied up, you're, enslaved, and God is the one who frees them from this. And that idea, particularly, even if that's not what's intended here, that idea of being freed from bondage has particular resonance for the Israelites. One of their most important examples of God and his beneficence, his goodness to his people, was their liberation from bondage in Egypt, right? And they're brought into the promised land. So that idea has a lot of potency within their context, certainly. Mm-hmm.
Somebody whipped.
Yeah, yeah, it's another good way of putting it, is that the idea of bondage goes along with, again, punishment, enslavement, the whip. The cords could well be the idea of being struck and cutting away or destroying the thing that is used to inflict punishment. Can also work very well with this. The Greek version of this actually jumps to what they believe to be whoever wrote this, who translated initially into Greek. They thought it meant, so they actually wrote in here, that God cuts the neck of the wicked. The idea of the cords, the tendons that you see in one's throat, right? When you're in exertion, you can see the tendons and things appear. They thought that was the analogy, the original translator, one of the original translators into Greek, and they just wrote that in there. The idea of, again, God destroying the enemies in this way. Death. Not the same idea, but the same ultimate meaning as the idea of cutting the cord of one's life, if we imagine it's, a life is a string and you cut it. Yes, sir?
Kind of the opposite end of the spectrum in Hosea
Mm-hmm.
11:4 talks about God's loving kindness, and he says, I led them with cords of human kindness, with ties of love.
Mm.
So it maybe an idea of being led or tied to or connected to in some way.
Yeah, yeah. In particular, in that passage from Hosea, I think the idea that immediately comes to mind there, without having spent a lot of time on it, but is that the idea that we are still bound to God, right? That we are subservient and that He is in control. But instead of being cruel about it, God uses kindness and love in order to bind His people to Him, right? That is the way that He wants it to work, not in a system of fear and punishment solely, but of love and compassion. Yeah. Right. No, and that's true. Yeah, the difference is between the way that the enemies of Israel function and the way that God would. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this is where we have the shift in the middle of this psalm. So it goes from this idea of being thankful or speaking of what God has done to protect them to an imprecatory psalm. It begins now to have a prayer of destruction on those who are the enemies. So this is not a wholly imprecatory psalm, but there is half of it, 4 verses of this. Why is it that these people should be put to shame and turned back or sent backwards? It's not a trick question, but there's a few layers of poetic language here. Yeah, ultimately it's because they oppose God. So the initial line is those who hate Zion. Well, Zion is just a mountain, right? People don't really just hate a mountain. I don't get up in the morning and be like, oh, Rainier. No one does that. At least I don't think so. Maybe Mount St. Helens, people would be mad about that. But you don't really hate the mountain. So the mountain is metaphorical for the people who live there. It is the capital of Israel. It is the mountain in Jerusalem. So it is the people of Israel. So it's those who hate Israel. Well, but that isn't even the ultimate root of it, as you were saying. It's really those who hate God. Why do they hate the people of Israel? Because the people of Israel are the people of Yahweh. They're opposed to the people of Israel because they are doing what God commands, and they're ultimately opposed to God. And this is why this should happen. It's not like anybody that just doesn't like me is necessarily a bad person. I'm not so great. I could be unkind. I can be inconsiderate. I'm not perfect. And if somebody doesn't like me because they had a bad interaction or a bad experience talking to me, okay, that's fine. I can understand that. That's okay. But if somebody is in opposition to me because I am trying to promote the Word of God and trying to preach the gospel, well, then they need to have, that needs to stop. Not because of me, but because of God. And this is the idea that the psalmist is getting at with this, again, kind of dual-layered metaphor is that it is not just the mountain, it is not just the people of Jerusalem, it is because these are the people of God. That when you oppose the chosen people of God, you are setting yourself in opposition to the creator of all that is. And such things are wicked. It's wicked to oppose God. And there should be defeats. They should be put to shame, defeated, turned back, stopped. They need to be prevented from continuing to do this. The psalmist isn't concerned for himself, but for what he and his people represent, which is why it is phrased this way. Why is there grass on a housetop in verse 6? Okay. Yeah, in these parts of the world, if you had grass growing off your housetop, you are not doing proper home maintenance. This is a sign that someone needs to clean your gutters or get rid of the moss on your roof, something like that. Not quite the same for the Israelites, though. The Israelites frequently had houses that had very flat roofs. And we see this kind of implied or given in several stories. For example, in the gospel, there are the people that climb with the paralytic friend to the roof, and then they cut a hole in the roof and lower him through the roof. And frequently, people would go up onto their housetops to do things, to pray, to watch. They would sometimes use them for spreading out grain or something that were going to dry in the sun, various things. So they had flat rooftops, and their houses tend to be made of clay or dirt in some form or fashion that has been strengthened so that you can actually stand up there. Well, if anybody's ever seen those old Chia Pet commercials, you know what happens if you get some seeds and a little water on a little bit of clay. Things sprout. Things grow. But people doing their proper home maintenance and using their roof the way they should, how long is that grass going to last? Not long. Not long. You don't let it grow real tall. You get seeds that get worked into the rooftop when you're drying grain and you start getting wheat or barley or something sprouting out of your roof. Well, do you let it grow and then harvest it? Not a trick question. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You don't do that. You get rid of it. You need this space for other things. You can't wait months for things to grow and just and so this is what he's talking about. He's saying, hey, you get grass on the rooftop, it's going to be gone. It dies. It withers. You don't let it live. And he goes on to emphasize this in 7. The reaper does not fill his hand this way. These are the things that are just cut down to be destroyed, not to be saved, not to be preserved, not because they have value, but for destruction. This is the metaphor for those who are wicked, that they be stopped before they reach the full fulfillment of their plan, of their intention. For the wicked to be turned back and put to shame, he says, this is like the things that you find growing out of your rooftop. You don't let it finish. God, make it like that so that there is never a coming to fruition, never a coming to maturity. Cut it down before it really gets going. And then, filling the hand or binding these to fill the bosom. This is a way of saying that there shouldn't be any results. God, I don't want this to come to any, whatever the plan was, there shouldn't be any produce, no fruit of this to be occurring so that they can actually have something to show for what they're doing. An imprecation against the wicked that they not only be stopped, but that they have no success whatsoever. Yes, sir?
I think it's a continuation maybe of the plowing metaphor, right? When you're plowing back,
Sure, yeah, no,
And this type of plowing is not,
productive,
it's not productive.
yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. That this is continuing that kind of agricultural idea that we began with, right? That the wicked are doing or have done and will continue to attempt to destroy the people of Israel, right? Using that plowing metaphor. But that the prayer is that it is instead, not like the things in the field, but like the things on the rooftop. Destroyed before its time, not coming to fruition. Yeah, that's an excellent observation.
The withering of the grass on the rooftop makes me think of the parable where the seed was sown on rocky ground
Mm-hmm.
and it sprang up, but then it didn't have any roots, so it withered. And I think on a clay, like hard clay roof would be like that too.
Mm-hmm.
A plant could sprout, but then it wouldn't be able to thrive.
Yeah.
It would just wither away.
That's true. That's true. My lack of botanical or biological, botanical is the right word, knowledge probably hampers me in fully processing this metaphor. But yeah, something growing on a clay roof is unlikely to have, right, the correct roots and so forth in order to fully thrive anyway. Yeah. Chia seeds, I guess, are an exception to this. I just still keep thinking about the chia pets when I think of this. You know, the old info, it was the commercials on late night television. Anyway. The whole point of this, again, and getting to the end, this final verse, is that those who are working against God cannot be blessed by God. Those who are working against his people will not receive his blessing. This verse, nor do those who pass by say, the blessing of the Lord be upon you. We bless you in the name of the Lord. This is still in reference to the wicked, to those who hate Zion, that those who go by, those who witness this, will not support them. Right? That they will receive nothing from God because they are, in fact, opposed to him. So this is, I don't know if this is really what we phrase like a curse. The opposite of a blessing is a curse, right? Because you're asking God to do something beneficial, and a curse is you're asking God to do something detrimental. But this is certainly asking that they not receive any blessing, or noting that they cannot or will not receive blessing for this. And that's it. What did I miss? What did I skip past? What questions or comments do you have? Now's the chance. You got lots of time today. No one? Nothing? Yes? No? Oh, thought you had your hand up. All right. Well, this is, again, a little bit of shorter psalm, 8 verses. I will probably, just for everybody's reference, try and put 130 and 131 together next week. 131 is only 3 verses, and 130 is just 8. So we'll try and get through 2 next time, and that way I won't have to leave time for anybody to register a complaint, just in case. So thank you all very much for your time and attention this morning, and we'll talk next week.